You've probably heard all kinds of opinions about whether to max out your TFSA or RRSP first, and it can get confusing very fast. No one wants to mess this up, especially when your hard-earned money is on the line. But here's the thing, one isn't always better than the other. It really depends on you, your income, your goals, and what you see for your future. I personally use both the TFSA and the RRSP, and by the end of this video, I'll share exactly why. In this video, I won't go over basics like contribution limits or account rules. This video is all about helping you choose between the TFSA or the RRSP. For a basic introduction, check out these videos up here. But I will quickly recap the two main differences between the RRSP and the TFSA. Difference number one is what happens with your contributions. When you contribute to your RRSP, you can choose to deduct the amounts, which will then reduce your taxable income. This can be 25%, even 30%, depending on your income brackets. TFSA contributions, on the other hand, do not reduce your taxable income at all. Difference number two is about withdrawals. Any income you earn in the RRSP is usually not taxed as long as the funds remain in the account. But you generally have to pay taxes when you withdraw money from the plan. On the other hand, any amount contributed to as well as any income earned in your TFSA, for example investment income and capital gains, is generally tax-free, even when it is withdrawn. Now that that's clear, I'll walk you through some basic scenarios where the RRSP or TFSA makes more sense, then show how goals and situations can tip the scale either way. Quick disclaimer also, guys, this is not financial advice, just sharing what I've learned over the years. The first thing to consider when deciding between an RRSP and a TFSA is your income, now versus in the future. And to explain this better, I made this beautiful table for you. In scenario one, let's say that right now you're in a low tax bracket and earn $45,000 per year. The cutoff is usually around $50,000. And you expect a much higher income in the future. Let's say that's $120,000 in 5 years from now. In that case, it's usually better not to contribute to an RRSP yet and instead invest in a TFSA first. The idea is that later, when you're in a higher tax bracket, you can save much more money on income taxes. A quick example to show this. Note that these are just approximate numbers to illustrate this concept. If you earn $45,000, your marginal tax rate is 20%. And let's say that you contributed $8,000 to your RRSP. So your income tax savings and refund will be about $1,604. An income of $100,000 puts you in a much higher tax bracket with a marginal tax rate of 43%. So by contributing the same $8,000, your tax refund is about $3,472, which is more than double. In scenario two, let's say that your income is higher at $85,000 now. But you expect that in the near future, in about 3 years, you'll be earning more than $110,000. This is usually the upper cutoff used. Even though you're earning more compared to the previous scenario, it could still be better to hold off investing into an RRSP until you get into an even higher tax bracket and instead invest into a TFSA for now. But what if you don't expect your income to increase? Instead, you expect that your income will decrease to $40,000 in the future, which is much lower. In that case, it makes sense to maximize the income tax savings by maxing out your RRSP now while you're still in that higher tax bracket. Now in scenario three, imagine right now you're in an even higher tax bracket earning $150,000. If you expect to earn less in the future, $90,000 for example, because you're going from full-time to part-time, it also makes sense to max out your RRSP now while you're still in that higher tax bracket. Another thing to consider in all these scenarios is how much you expect your income to be in retirement when you'd normally start withdrawing your money. In general, people make less when they retire, therefore they benefit from investing in an RRSP now as they get a tax refund and pay less taxes on their withdrawals during retirement later. However, you might be one of those people who will earn more in retirement than now, which is rare. In this case, if you invest in an RRSP now, you'll be paying more taxes on your withdrawals later because you'll be in a higher tax bracket. So in this case, is using an RRSP an absolute no? This will depend on other factors we'll talk about. By the way, if you find my video useful and like how I break down all things financial in Canada, please subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll not miss a video from me. Now that we've talked about the basic scenarios, let's talk about personal situations, goals, and opportunities that may override the above. If you have access to employer RRSP matching, then definitely make use of this. Usually employers who offer RRSP matching offer a 1-to-1 matching up to a certain percentage of your income. If it's a 2% matching on your $80,000 salary, that's $1,600. So you contribute $1,600 and the company will top up the same. It's basically 100% return, so you definitely don't want to leave this free money on the table. But before you even start investing, whether that's into an RSP or TFSA, there's something just as important that could save you even more money in the long run: high interest debt. This doesn't include your mortgage, but it does include things like credit cards or personal loans with interest rates above 10%, especially credit cards charging 20 to 25%. Before you invest, make sure you've paid off this kind of debt. Doing so is like getting an immediate risk-free return of 25 or so percent. It doesn't matter if you earn 12% return on your investments when you still have high interest debt. That would be like trying to fill a bathtub without a drain plug. Your investment gains will just leak away as fast as those interest charges pile up. And another reason to hold off investing into both TFSA and RSP is if you don't have an emergency fund. To stay safe on the road, you wear a seatbelt. Your emergency fund is your seatbelt for your investment journey. How much you need exactly and where to keep it is debatable. Ideally, you'd have 3 to 6 months of living expenses in your emergency fund, but at the very least, you should have 1 month of living expenses immediately accessible in cash, not tied up in any investment. If you lock up all of your money into investments like stocks in your RSP or TFSA and an emergency hits, you'd be forced to sell at a loss when the market is down. Please let me know in the comments, do you have an emergency fund right now? And if so, how much do you keep in it? Also factor this next thing in when deciding between RSP and TFSA. If you're planning to buy a home, the best thing you can do is to first put your money into an FHSA or First Home Savings Account. You can contribute up to $40,000 over 15 years. Similar to the HBP or Home Buyer's Plan under the RSP, your contributions reduce your tax bill. The difference is that withdrawals from the FHSA do not have to be returned back into the account, while withdrawals from your RRSP for the HBP have to be paid back within 15 years. So if there's any chance that you're going to buy a home in the next years, put your money into the FHSA first. Next, if you have more money than you want to save for your home down payment, then you can also use the HBP and contribute to your RSP as well. So yes, you can use money from your FHSA and combine it with money from your RSP to pay for your home down payment. And another diversion from RSP and TFSA can make sense if you're saving for your children's education by using the RESP, or the Registered Education Savings Plan. By contributing to your child's RESP, you may qualify for what's called the Canada Education Savings Grant, or CESG. Here, the government will match 20% up to $500 in a given year on your first $36,000 of RESP contributions for each child, up to a lifetime limit of $7,200. And same as with the TFSA, any investment income is not taxable as long as it stays in the account. However, when you withdraw it, so your child receives it as they start studying, it will count as their income. But usually their income at that time will still be very low, so taxes here are either low or none. The 20% match is definitely awesome, but I would still exhaust things like the 100% RSP employer match first before I invest in this. The next thing is super important when considering choosing between the TFSA and RSP, which is short-term purchase goals. If you're like me, you'll have big ticket items over the years that cost thousands. That includes a wedding, vacations, or even a car upgrade. When the time comes, you'll need the money fast, in cash. So you don't want to have the money stuck in your RSP and have to deal with tax consequences. Rather, put that money into a TFSA. Also, make sure to invest it in something that's more stable, like a money market fund or a HISA, high interest savings ETF, or a bond ETF. They usually fluctuate very little in value and pay around 3 to 4% in interest. By the time you need the money, you can just sell it without tax implications and withdraw the money. The following year, your contribution room will replenish and you can fill up your TFSA again. So guys, here's one thing that many beginners don't know. When you put your money into a TFSA or RSP, you'll only reap the full benefits if you actually invest the money in something. And you can easily do that yourself using almost any investment app in the market. But if you want to save yourself a lot of money, I'd go with a modern online investment app rather than traditional brokers of the big banks. The one I like to use that doesn't have any account fees, monthly fees, or trading fees for stocks and ETFs is Wealthsimple. I've been a loyal user for about 5 years now just because it's super easy and fun to use. So if you want to sign up, you can get a $25 bonus straight into your account by using my referral code in the descriptions below and funding your account with at least $1. Now guys, here's something really important to note. all things considered, if you highly value flexibility, then you'd probably want to invest more into a TFSA. It's just difficult to predict the future. You don't know for sure when and how much money you will need to access in the next years, and perhaps you have no idea of your earning potential in the next years either. Picture this, you put all of your money in an RSP, and after 3 years, a lot happens, your income doubles, and you want to spend $15,000 for a home renovation. If all your investments are in your RRSP, you'll have to pay a lot of taxes on that sudden withdrawal. But if you had that money in a TFSA, you could just withdraw it without further tax consequences, and that just gives you a ton of flexibility. Another thing people rarely consider when it comes to deciding between RSP and TFSA is RSP refund reinvestment. Some people believe the RSP is always a bad choice because if you don't plan carefully, you could end up paying more taxes later when you withdraw. For example, let's say your income today is $90,000. You contribute to your RSP and get a nice tax break. But 20 years later, when you withdraw your money, your income is actually higher, let's say $110,000, maybe from passive income like book royalties. In that case, you'd be paying taxes at a higher rate than when you contributed. Definitely not ideal. But here's the thing, your RSP can still work in your favor if you use your tax refund wisely. For example, by reinvesting it into a high-growth investment, the compound growth over 20 years could more than offset the higher taxes you pay later. Of course, whether or not there's an offset will depend on what you invested in and at what rate it compounds. And that brings me to alternative high-yield investments. Okay, let's say that because you've miscalculated your income situation, and let's admit it's almost impossible to predict your income 20 years from now, you end up losing out by investing in your RSP and paying, for example, 10 to 15% more in taxes than you would have had you opted out of the RSP. But what if you took that refund and invested it in an asset that grew 181% on average per year? And that was Bitcoin. Since its inception in 2009 until 2018, it grew on average by 181% per year. Crazy, right? And granted, over time, the average growth will become lower and lower. But even if it grows by just 20% per year on average, over 20 years, if you'd invested an additional $1,000 in a year, money you got from your RSP refund into Bitcoin, it would be worth $186,688 over 20 years. But note here, guys, that you cannot directly buy Bitcoin in your RSP or TFSA, but you can buy a Bitcoin ETF. Just in case investing into Bitcoin directly is on your radar, you can do that on Wealthsimple. Although granted, the trading fees are rather high, but the advantage is that you'll have all your investments on one platform. Alternatively, you can buy Bitcoin on Endax, which is a Canadian crypto exchange that has one of the lowest fees in the market. And you can get a $10 bonus with them if you use my referral link in the descriptions below. What I'm trying to say here is that when considering RSP versus TFSA, don't just think about the difference in tax amounts, but also about potential opportunities that you can have by getting cash upfront through a refund. Now, what about investing into both the TFSA and the RSP? So that's exactly what I've done, guys. It doesn't always have to be either or. You can also split your money up and invest part of it into your TFSA and the other part into RSP, depending on what makes sense at what time, in what condition, and with what goals. Of course, if you can, max out both accounts. If you earn 100K and the yearly contribution limit of the RSP is 18%, which is $18,000, plus the TFSA contribution limit of currently $7,000 this year, that's $25,000 in total. But if you don't have that much to invest in, you can still split your money into two buckets, TFSA and RSP, depending on your goals and personal strategy. Here's my experience. About 5 years ago, I opened an RSP to save up for my home down payment. There was no FHSA at the time, by the way. Otherwise, I would have done that first. I just recently arrived in Canada and my income was very low, so I didn't benefit much from tax savings by investing into my RSP. I invested about $8,000 into my RSP to prepare for my home down payment in combination with my husband's RSP. And once that was done, I held off investing into my RSP and started investing into my TFSA instead. And fast forward, my income has more than quadrupled, so recently I have started using my RSP again to reduce my taxes. As I foresee some larger expenses in the future and want to have the flexibility, I invest most of my money into my TFSA now. Now, the only reason that I'm not maxing out either is because I'm investing directly into Bitcoin, which cannot be held in these accounts. Guys, let me know, was this video useful to you? Also, if you need some inspiration for what to invest in, check out this video on my favorite ETFs next.